jump over here. Perfect. All right. So you guys know how this works. I go live and I answer questions for free about Social Security disability law. Social Security disability law falls under SSDI and SSI benefits. Here's some basic rules for these 5-minute consultations. No question stacking. Call in and be ready with your question. No story mode. Be ready to roll. Use a fake name when you call in. You dial 407. Actually, Kosher's in there. Kosher, help me out with this. 407 279 1754. Again, 407 279 1754. And basically, I will answer questions for free. You get like a 5-minute mini consultation. You get to access my brain for a quick moment to ask me a good legal question. With that said, keep in mind some questions that are really tough for me to answer are you giving me like 3 sentences and then asking me, do you have a good claim? Sometimes I can answer it, sometimes I can't, but usually I need to know the entire client file. And the reason why is a lot of you have some negative things in your file that can sometimes hurt the winning of benefits, and you don't share those with me. Another thing too is like a lot of you will talk about certain types of like claims or settlements or income that might not be income. Like you have to, when you get money coming to you and you're not sure how the contract is written as to receiving the money thereafter, and it might be considered income, it might be countable, non-countable against your Social Security benefits. Like keep in mind, I'd have to see that document to know if it is a countable income. All right, with that said, we're going to turn it over to the phone real quick. I know that they start these videos with a little mini commercial and then people kind of like get on board. But the bottom line is, if you want to go ahead and call in, we're going to open that up soon. Again, it is 407 279 1754. And remember, when you call in, this phone right here will be started. Once it's started, at that point, when I answer the phone call and you hear me on the phone, you have to mute your video on your end, like the TV or the video that's playing on your phone or the TV, because we're going to have a little bit of feedback if we have both those on. So you just have to talk to me directly through the phone and mute the video on your end while we're doing it. All right. Other than that, let's get rolling. I'm going to go ahead and begin the countdown for the first caller. Remember, it is the 407-279-1754. Usually we do this, by the way, on Mondays and Thursdays, but it is, here we go. Here's the first caller. Okay. Hi, this is Attorney Walter Hnot. We are live on YouTube. Remember to use a fake name throughout this process. What is your legal question? Go ahead.
Hey, Walter, this is your favorite blue guy in the chat.
Sure.
I had you on speed dial just in case nobody called.
Perfect.
I do actually have a question for you.
Good.
In the case of the the Ticket to Work program,
Mhm.
if you were to say make it through the 9 months and get moved to the next period, and then eventually they cut off your payments, and at some point I understand they cut off Medicare as well.
Mhm.
What's the process to go back if at some point you didn't fail?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically the way it works is you've got your 9-month trial work period, your 3 months of extended eligibility period, and then the Ticket to Work, program after that. The 9-month extended eligibility period, you basically have trigger months where if you earn over that, bottom line is they trigger, but you can spread them out. You can earn one in January, one in May, one in August, whatever. However, when you get past those 9-month, that 9-month trial work period, and then you go to basically the 3-month extended eligibility period, then those 3 months are continuous. So you start one, and then automatically the others 2 come right after that. Then you go into your Ticket to Work program gig, and then if that doesn't work out, or there's some issue, and then they cut off your benefits, and then they cut off your Medicare, your question is, okay, what do I do to get reinstated back onto the program? Assuming that there's no fraud, assuming that you made best efforts to go ahead and actually work the jobs and they just didn't work out because of your impairments, which happens, assuming you did that, and they're not saying you did similar fault or fraud or any one of those types, basically you're going to go through a new adjudication process to see whether or not you are eligible for disability benefits again. That is called the 8-step sequential process, which, in that instance, now they do have expedited options like EXRs. EXRs are essentially an expedited process to get you back onto benefits, but they're only applicable in some situations. Otherwise, you're going to be going through what is traditionally referred to as the 8-step sequential process. Oh, no, sorry, wait. At that point, so we're saying, are you saying like you are fully removed, like they've kicked you off of benefits completely, or are you like saying that you're in a temp program and you violated something in the program? Like, give me some direction on this.
Well, my questions were forward-looking, but I'm saying in the case where, say, you did something, you came up with a way to make money, you made enough money that you didn't qualify for SSDI anymore, and you kept it going for 18 months, 2 years, and then you couldn't do it anymore. So that's kind of my question. It's theoretical, of course, but in that case, my question, I guess, really is how difficult is it to get back? And in my case, I'm a step 3 listing level approval.
Okay. So, all right. So first thing is we're assuming it's 2 years in. So you're within EXR territory where they basically do an expedited reinstatement review to see if, everything matches up and you should be good. If you're a title, if you're a Title II, Element 3 of the 5-step sequential process individual, then it should be relatively pretty straightforward process. They will check your medical state. How severe are you still? They will check your administrative state. Do you meet all the administrative requirements, financial requirements? Are you under SGA? Yada, yada, so on and so forth. Is there any side money? You could imagine with one of these gigs where it could be an area of interest for an investigator. So let's say that you were making something, right? And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the sales dried up. The SSA is going to look at that potentially as, a fraud situation where, realistically, maybe you're just doing them under the table now. You're just, pocketing the cash. So like in this hypothetical, what type of vocation were you doing?
YouTube.
YouTube. Okay. So if you're doing YouTube and are you earning over SGA or are you earning under SGA?
Well, I'm not earning anything right now. At the moment, it's hypothetical, but I'm concerned about, because in my case, if I make over SGA, I lose more than twice SGA in check, in payments. So I have to pre-think all of this, but so this is kind of future looking, but I understand there's residuals and all of that when it comes to YouTube, but I'm just kind of working toward the future is, if I can magically make, $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month and can pull that off for 2 years, that's great. But, few people are permanent on YouTube.
So, what I would say is this. So in order to, okay, are we talking? All right. So you've given me the finance. So $5,000, $10,000. So in order to get to $5,000, $10,000, you've really got to have around, I would say, subscriber wise, between 75,000 subscribers and 150 to 200,000 subscribers. And you've got to consistently make videos, consistently. So if you did that, so here's the deal. The only way it works for people who are disabled to do YouTube and then successfully not end up in a bad situation where they get investigated, because when you do YouTube, like, you are face forward showing the world essentially that you are not disabled because you're able to do a job, and the job is like your own little self-employed creating videos, publishing them, etc., editing, publishing, updating, whatever. So, when it comes to the SSA having evidence that you're not the disabled person which you claim you are, they got it right there because it's all live. You know what I mean? It's all, they just go through your account. The only way this works, like if you look at like the blinded billionaire guy, he makes, tens of thousands of dollars each month as a result of his channel. So he's not worried about getting an SSA, SSDI check because he's way beyond SGA and he'll never go back to SGA. So he's not worried about that. What he's worried about is, basically any claim that, so like, that's the thing is like, at that point, he's just there to collect the money. Like his entire thing is like, hey, I'll go on vacation. I'll do my thing. I'll have fun, blind 2 billion. That's his whole gig. To get to his level, like his thing that he pushed And there were bots that showed up on this channel, and you guys have probably seen those, that were advertising Blind Billionaire and stuff like that. But in order, the main thing that made his channel explode and go really big was that he was pushing very heavily future stimulus, like the Christmas stimulus, the Easter stimulus, this stimulus, that stimulus, this president, that president. So he was pushing those videos. And so that was like the thing he latched onto that people would constantly watch videos of him about. If you don't have a thing like that, and you're just basically doing status update videos on what's going on, it can be difficult to break into creating the audience. So the one thing that YouTube, like a lot of people don't realize with YouTube, because they see all these success stories where they became super big and they had this one gimmick and that made them big, and now they tell other people they can become big too. The problem you run into that, like, a lot of people don't know about my channel, is that my channel just turned 12 years old. I saw it in the little back end feature. And because it turned 12 years old, it only really started to earn money, I think, around 4 or 5 years ago. No, four-ish years ago. Before that, nobody cared. I made videos, nobody watched them. So for like, 7, 8 years, nobody cared. And then I, started to go ahead and basically delve a little deeper and use my knowledge base of politically where things were going, structurally, using internal documents to show people the light without showing the internal document. With that stuff, then it became very relevant because people could see the direction of where Social Security was going, what was happening with it, etc. So as a result, it grew and grew and grew and grew. Now, I never used on my end, which was to my great disadvantage, like those phones in China that allow you to basically just, they line up the phones and their real accounts linked to those phones, and they just run your videos over and over and over and over again, and they just comment on your videos over and over and over again. And then they also have servers in China that will basically, they're not the actual profiles, they're like fake profiles, but it's just a computer program that mass watches your videos, mass basically, goes ahead and, creates thumbs up and stuff like that. We've seen that. We've seen Dr. Ed Weir, bots on this channel and stuff like that. I never did that, which greatly injured my ability to grow quickly. And the reason why is that I can't do it because of the Florida bar. Another thing too is that you have to be careful with that as a disabled person, because, if you do some sort of criminal act, which that's a violation of YouTube policy. It's not really a violation. I don't think it would be a violation of the federal government. I mean, you would just get kicked off of YouTube and stuff. But if they ever like sat down and looked at your actual channel, I don't think that would affect your benefits in the future if you did something like that. But most channels that become big fast are using that to boost views, to boost likes, to boost referral links, link back, stuff like that, to actually get to that level. But again, I say this to you, the tough thing about YouTube or really becoming famous on any one of these platforms is that there's a certain group, a certain individual that people will connect with because of their personality, charisma, whatever. And when they do that, I'm going to take this next call in a bit. Not everybody is meant to be like viewed by tons and tons of people. And that's not to say that you aren't. You absolutely could be that person. It's just, I've had a lot of people ask me, like, how do I do that? How do I do this? How do I do this? How do I do that? And what I tell them always as like a disclaimer at the very end, as I tell them, I'm like, look, here's the bottom line. Not everybody is successful with this because not everybody is interesting to watch. And so let me give you an example of that. When we put Brad Pitt up on the TV screen, people usually watch him. So if I said to you, why would people watch Brad Pitt? What would you say?
I guess he's pretty to look at.
He's a good looking dude, right? He's schmoozy. He's cool. He's, basically mastered a performance of art that delivers information in a very, very interesting way, right? He's a household name. Everybody knows his face. So it's like it's like a politician. Like, you're going to go ahead and watch him. You're going to go ahead and look at him. You're going to go ahead and interact with him because you know his brand. You trust his face. You trust the words coming out of his mouth. That's why a lot of these companies hire, influencers because people trust them to deliver information that they're expecting. So, like that's the thing. It's like, how much do we trust Pam Bondi after there being no Epstein list? And then we got what's his face? What's the one? He's a Jewish commentator who's really famous. That's part of like what is his name?
Ben Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro just came out with a video talking about how the Epstein list really didn't probably exist and how it'd be ridiculous to expect it existed and yada, yada, yada. And he was giving us all these attorney arguments as to why it probably did not exist to begin with. And he's like, well, the Democrats would use
I
against
listened to
Trump.
that today.
Yeah. So the bottom line is like, the Democrats would have gone ahead and used it against him. They probably didn't have a list to begin with, and it was probably just a collection of names or whatever that, was people who potentially interact, yada, yada, yada. But, from an attorney standpoint, from me looking at it as somebody who is very high in his industry, so it's like accomplished attorneys, I think most would agree, is the most viewed, most subscribed to, most clicked on, disability attorney. I've reached a certain level of analytical skills when it comes to this situation. The first thing that came to my mind when it came to that whole Ben Shapiro video was the basic notation of this. I knew deep down Ben Shapiro was being disingenuous with me through that video, because I knew that in order for people to make it to an island off of that country, there had to be travel itineraries. And if there's a travel itinerary for some prince, some king, some super rich billionaire, then they have a list of people that were clients and or patrons and or users of the service or the services of, Epstein. So as a result of that, immediately I knew that he was being disingenuous with me and he was selling something that was given to him to be sold. And that upset me because I usually trust Ben Shapiro to deliver to me information and news that is actually truthful, that is actually direct, pointed, and really good and strong. But in this instance, when somebody tells me there is no client list, there's no Epstein list, there's no list of people that went there, it is inherently factually incorrect to say that travel itineraries for individuals do not exist anywhere. In order to get to an island, okay, you have to be boated there or flown near there or whatever there. And when you're one of those individuals, right, they have to set things up. Somebody has to meet with you. Somebody has to boat you there. Somebody has to greet you. Somebody has to show up and make sure you have food and clothing and this and that. So in order go ahead.
Well, I'll let you get on to the show, but yeah, I would point out that he was specifically referring to third-party client list, and as he pointed out, the third-party clients all have been found not liable. So, but certainly appreciate your time today, Walter, and I would appreciate your time.
Well, and let's do this real quick. They were found not liable, right? Because he was saying, okay, this particular young female at that time, that's now a woman, she might have committed, a horrible act to herself, or her testimony wasn't valid, or this or that, or this or that, or this or that, or whatever, right? So,
and numerous lawsuits that didn't make it, yeah.
Right. But let me ask you this, okay? After seeing Diddy and OJ and other individuals falling into those categorizations, you've probably noticed that the law is not always about punishing people with jail time. Sometimes it's about punishing people with money or taking money away from them in the form of a settlement. And what a lot of those claims were that were brought forward by, essentially Ben Shapiro, were claims that had settlements. And settlements, you do not usually admit to liability. Otherwise,
but there was only one settlement.
I actually know of more than one settlement, but look it up. Go into it. Yeah.
Only one known publicly that I'm aware of.
So the big thing is this: if there was a settlement, right? Does an individual usually go ahead and say, "I was bad. I'm so sorry. Here's the money. Please forgive me. I'm a terrible person," or do they say, "Here's the money. I admit to nothing"?
No, only Prince Philip. Yeah.
Right. So now remember, Prince Philip, is he a financially savvy, smart individual with lots of money? Or is he kind of like the family, not really smart with money family member?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was easier to write a check for him, or at least with somebody else's money. But yeah, she spent 10 years going after another relatively famous Jewish guy, and that didn't work either.
Mm-hmm. So then, I mean, and here's the thing, that particular prince is terrible with money. I mean, he's lost his ski chateau all over the place. Money had to be lent to him for this situation. He's just, but again, his real worth is his attachment to his reputation, and the reputation, how it attaches to the royal family. So the royal family had to make sure this thing went away. Now, right. So you may have noticed that when heads of state or third-party representatives of heads of state, right, family members, right, when they get in trouble, it hurts the head of state when they get in trouble. So let's take, for example, Trump. Let's say Trump had an affair problem. Okay. What happened with that affair issue? What was the settlement related to that?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So remember, there was a stormy day, a stormy lady.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think we're conflating various facts, but yeah, I mean, in this particular case, she went after several big name people, and they all walked away with no settlement because she was just throwing names around, and wasn't even invited to testify. And she ended up wherever she is now, dead. But yeah, my point on that particular issue is, and I actually made a comment in the first video today regarding the fact that we all believe there was a list, even though we never knew that there was a list. And now that we've been told there is no list, we don't believe it. Well, whether there is or not, we don't know. And similar to the Kennedy papers, when the Kennedy papers didn't have anything exciting to talk about, we all decided, well, there must be still hiding things from us, when in reality, maybe they've never been hiding anything.
Well, all right, let me give you a pointed response to that. Let's assume, right, that there was no list. There was no 10 by 13 piece of paper, a big one, with name, phone number, arrival time on it. Let's say that there was no flight record list, right? No little book, whatever. Okay. So is that de facto what we assume to be a correct list, or would it be proper to assume that text messages between Epstein and those who worked with him when setting up and arranging the meetings, which they had to have, you can't just show up on the island unannounced, would that in itself also be an acceptable list?
Well, yes, if you assume that there was something going on with people going to the island, but we don't have any evidence of that either. So that's all just been assumed.
Right. So this is what the rich tend to do. In order to go ahead and prove some sort of criminal action, it's a high level of proof. The main thing you have to do is erase a fact that allows an element of that criminal act to not be fulfilled. And if that occurs, then no crime can go forward. Now, if the victim then makes a big news release, really gets out there, it's really pushing stuff, we normally see a settlement, right? Now, in this case, right, we have a bunch of testimony from young women about things that happened at the various homes, right? The one with the cactuses, the island, stuff like that, okay? And we know about the situation related to essentially the art exhibits and the purchasing of the art and so on and so forth through the Academia Institute, etc. So what we know is that very likely terrible things happened. Very likely terrible things happened to these young women. We know that,
by Epstein.
well, I mean, we assume
we know that. We're assuming everything else.
We're also assuming Epstein because the facts of, they don't really have.
He was convicted.
Yeah, he was. They did get him, and they did use him as like the fall potential because all the elements ran to him. But then the question becomes, why did they allow this to happen if their names were going to drop next? And now we know their names are not going to drop next because there's no list of names. You know? So it's like he was the fall guy. Yeah, go ahead.
I think we're falling into the absence of evidence is proof of guilt type scenario. It's wonderful in the press, but it's not a very good way to go through life.
Well, let me ask you this: do you feel that the government, who's in control of this adjudication, they have full control over it, has a history of being truthful and direct with the American people with releasing information? And I don't just mean on the spectrum of a traditional this party and that party. I mean in all facets of government interaction, including our interactions with other countries.
Well, no, I would distrust everybody equally, regardless of party. But you're somewhat ignoring the fact that if this were true, the previous administration would have loved to leak it, but it didn't get leaked. And
I disagree.
It comes into the new administration, and everybody's asking, well, where's the list? And the new administration has to come out and say, sorry, there is no list.
Yeah, I disagree. If the old administration had a list of both Democrats and Republicans, if they released the list and it was only in part, then it could have been hacked or released in some other way, and then the rest of the people would have come out. They slow rolled this thing to the point where it finally came to years after the death of a person in jail who no one believes he did this to himself, you know? So the bottom line is, this is a situation where if they were to release as a Democrat party the list, they would be injuring themselves and they would be injuring basically the other side. Now, you could say politically they could have done that at a good time when things were looking really bad and Trump was doing really well. And that would have been a strategy for them to lose, but the other side to lose more. That's usually the argument I think of when used strategically, a trial tactic release, a toxic pill to both sides. But you will notice the Democratic Party had some very large figures interacting with Epstein, where there's photos all over the place. One of which, of course, had a painting on the island that was very prominent, which I'm sure you've seen. Have you seen the painting, by the way?
Well, I don't know if I've seen that particular painting that you're referring to, but yeah, again, there's a lot of information tying various people to other various people, and in the society world of the rich, that's just a truism. And the parties mix very well when it comes to high society parties and that sort of thing. But again, it all comes down to evidence. And just because we believe something exists and believe there's more than meets the eye doesn't necessarily mean there is.
See, I would disagree again, because the absence of evidence is not always as a result of the truth. So a lot of people will say, okay, there's no evidence, therefore it's over. The person loses. They don't have the evidence. I have been through many, many hearings, many, many trials where I've seen that evidence magically disappeared, or evidence was fraudulently tampered with to alter the production of when things would come in and when things would become available. I've seen it many times where they'll release evidence to an attorney and they can't access it, and the judge will schedule something that has to be done the next day, and because they can't access that CD of information, they can't properly establish a defense. It has never been more apparent to me in life every year that I go through with owning the law firm that evidence, when it does not exist, is not a good showing that it has never existed. In fact, if you look at this situation with Epstein, right? A lot of people question it because, it could be just a moral ground, it could be, intuition, whatever. But when people look at it, what they're really saying at the most fundamental level is that when billionaires are afraid to have their names released, like let's say Bill Clinton, which if you ever get a chance, go look up the Bill Clinton Epstein painting that was in Epstein's office. Okay. When you go ahead and look at these billionaires, for example, our Microsoft founder, right, that had visited the island. And when it comes to vast sums of money, which put another way is wrath of God money, money to manipulate all kinds of things, money to manipulate people who have never had $400,000 put into their account, and then they become not available to testify, or a document that was in their possession was destroyed. I'll give you an example of a mini version of this, right? We have a disability hearing. The evidence is there that the judge said something very unethical, immoral. After the hearing, the judge's clerk will call me and say, unfortunately, the recording for this hearing was erased. We no longer have it. And there was an error with the typing that went along with it. I would then proffer to you, do you believe the lack of evidence is the truth of this situation?
No, I understand your point. I don't think we entirely disagree with each other, but I certainly appreciate your point of view.
So I'm putting you on the spot a little bit because I want you to feel that sizzle, because this is what it's like to actually do the live videos, because people throw stuff at you and you have to be able to. So Ben Shapiro, he was of the belief that the lack of evidence was indicative of this proof that this thing didn't have a list, or this thing wasn't able to be proved, or this thing, yada, yada, yada. That is not how established attorneys think. That's how a YouTube attorney thinks.
Well, and he's a YouTube attorney,
right?
So I'll give him that one. But the same thing, you could compare what you just said to the whole, the last 60 years of the Kennedy assassination. There's simply no evidence, and at some point, the no evidence side gets to win the argument, as opposed to saying, well, just because there's no evidence, there must still be hidden evidence.
Well, there always is hidden evidence. Whenever a president is killed, people don't talk about it because they're worried about who actually facilitated the killing of the president. Whether the president was poisoned or shot or whatever, there's always hidden evidence. Let me give you an example, okay? Let's say that there's a new regime, right, inside the United States government, a hypothetical. And that new regime hyper audits disabled people or retired people or somebody receiving a benefit within the government. Do you think these individuals that are out there who basically, let's say they were on retirement benefits, disability benefits, VA benefits, whatever, compensation, whatever, if they went to an event and they saw an action occur, that they would be willing to testify as to what they saw, knowing that this group inside the government would then investigate them?
Well, I mean, in that hypothetical, I would expect them to investigate. But in the Kennedy case, we've been investigating for 60 years, and we haven't found anything. We found a bunch of questionable facts, but still no evidence. And at this point, we're talking about a bunch of dead people. So at this point, if there was some mystical truth, we might as well just let it out. So I'm coming at it from that point of view, in that, again, just because we make a story much bigger than it potentially is, the story never goes away, even if there was never a story to it. I mean, the Russian collusion case is still, I mean, there's still people who believe that.
Yeah, that's a weird
happened.
one. That's a weird one.
I mean, it was literally fictitious, made up.
That was invented, no doubt about it. Now, what's interesting, all right, well, okay, let me say this before I go into that one. Now, what is the big thing that happened with the Kennedy assassination, right? That was a different world because technologically there weren't 200 people with a cell phone filming the incident when it occurred because the iPhone did not exist at that point. You know, Polaroids were just not happening at that point. We were too far backwards in time. Now, why, with the Jeffrey Epstein situation, do we also have a blackout of potential media of what was going on with this situation, of the general public having access to what we would call the most truthful truth, which is where they took a video of it with their phone. They saw it with their eyes and took photos with their phone, right? There is actual evidence of it. Well, with Epstein, he lived in places where the general public could not get access to him. And that's how he got away with doing a lot of this stuff, because the general public couldn't see what was going on. They couldn't take photos. They couldn't interact with their ethical guidelines to say, what are you doing, Epstein? Stop doing that. Same thing happened with the Kennedy assassination. There were some film cameras. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
And sometimes in private, nothing shady goes on.
True. Very true. Sometimes when you have young girls with a bunch of older guys on an island where basically they spend days together doing various activities such as golf, frisbee, you know.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't think we're questioning the whether bad things happened. We pretty much know that based on Epstein and the conviction and that sort of thing. The key here is we are wanting to blame various people, but we don't have any evidence to point fingers.
Oh, we do. We know that a man committed atrocities. We know that there was a stylistic approach to how he did it. We know the female he used with the younger women to go ahead and, you know, make it happen. We know that other individuals were invited to the island. We know that these... yeah, go ahead.
And all of those are tied to Epstein himself. Nobody doubts Epstein was a horrible human being, but we're trying to call a bunch of other people horrible human beings.
Not just other people.
Without any evidence.
Rulers of countries, family members of rulers and billionaires, not just regular people, not just you and I. We are talking about people who have to control the narrative. You know, just like, for example, when there's a problem with Taylor Swift, she has a PR team paying all these local newspapers, local magazines to release positive reflection articles about her. That's how it works. That's how people believe Taylor Swift can do no wrong, because she has the PR team to back it. So the assumption that these individuals are clean, well, you know, it feels like they're clean because they are presented in society as clean individuals. They become tainted because an alternative narrative comes out, and the court systems, ultimately to your advantage, do not validate it. And you're saying, well, then there's no proof. Do you feel that our court system deals in absolute truth?
For the most part. I mean, I believe that certainly we're set up that if there's no evidence of truth, then whatever is claimed didn't happen in the eyes of the court. Now, in the eyes of the public, that's a different measurement. But my argument would be that most of us in the public just like exciting stories. And when we hear, hey, there's nothing to see here, we don't believe it, even if there's nothing to see there.
So you're saying that you believe the court system is so close to the truth that the excitement created by the future potential of news is likely to be less reliable than the specific evidence relied on by the court. But then I would proffer to you and ask you, is all evidence even good evidence, acceptable in a court of law for an adjudication of two parties? I'll tell you,
No.
the correct answer is no, and there is an entire
Right.
civil procedure book and criminal procedure book on what is allowable and not.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I read the technicalities on legal specifics. I mean, obviously, you know far more than I do on that. My point was that in a court, you need evidence, at least of some sort, where in the public, you don't need any evidence at all. And unfortunately, we just keep buying things without evidence. And again, it makes for fun and exciting news. But back to the story, with whether it be Kennedy or Epstein, when we hear, hey, there's nothing new here, we're all disappointed because we want there to be something new there. We believe there's something new there. I'm just saying maybe there's nothing new there.
Well, let me ask you this. Did they release to the general public the specific evidence of what was collected from the phones of those people who visited that island?
Repeat that, I'm sorry.
So, did they release to the public the evidence of the user data of the phones, geographic locations, text messages, communications between those men and those younger women, communications basically between those who picked them up and brought them to the island, those who introduced them to the younger women? Did they release those text messages, geographic communications, etc., the cell phone data in total from those billionaires, those leaders of countries, those family members of heads of state?
Well, no, for a number of legal reasons. But
so then you can't rely on basically the truth because you haven't been given the factual basis to understand it.
Well, I agree. But
okay,
again,
cool. Yeah.
We're still at the point where we have no evidence. We simply have a lack of evidence.
Wait, we don't have evidence, or we the public have a lack of evidence, because they have tons of evidence. They have tons of information that they can't share with us because it's sealed. They won't give it to us. They're not allowed to because the court system sealed it so that you and I can't learn about it. When I go into Pacer, I'm not allowed to see it.
Or it's simply private.
Whoa, if it's private, then that means you're not allowed to see it because you are not able to have it be disclosed to you. That doesn't forgive the reality that they won't share it with you. You know, because it's private doesn't mean that it wouldn't convict these individuals.
Okay. Well, then I'll ask a simple question. Mm-hmm. At what point would you believe them?
Would I believe the evidence provided inside the Pacer system related to the court cases?
Well, at what point would you believe them to say there's nothing left to look at?
I would never believe them. I work with the federal government every single day. I would never fully believe them.
Whether Epstein or, in the comparison, the Kennedy case?
I know when the government has lied to me because I go back emotionally to those times and think about them. And I think about them when the government does something to harm a case that I feel should have, would have, could have been approved. I know that the government does things to protect itself. And so as a result,
I don't question that, but
yeah.
At what point does the public say?
No, we're talking about me though, not the public. We're talking about me in this.
Well, no, I mean, as human beings, we get to hold on to these things. But my point throughout much of this is simply the public view. I mean, we're so embedded in believing that there's more to see, more that we don't know. And because of that, we assume it's bad. We assume that person A, person B, person C that we particularly don't like, whether it be right, left, center, is on this magical list or was somehow involved in, killing a president. At what point can we, at what point do we have enough information or lack thereof to say that's it?
Well, for the general public, they're never given the chance of that because you were never given the data. You never had an unsealed case. You never had the phone details, the call details, the transportation details, the itineraries. You don't even get to make that call because you know internally you don't get to receive, you don't get to have the information to even make a decision. Like you can't make that decision. You don't have the right to make that
Right.
decision. You would violate your own
So-
ethics if you said, I give up. They didn't have it. They didn't find anything. I give up. Everything's fine. Like to say everything's fine and not actually have the case data where it's sealed away from you, to not have the actual, the evidence that could be collected. Look, if you ever got a chance to read through what the young women were saying, you might then say, there's a potential problem here. But if you're never provided any of that, then you don't even have the right to say that a conclusion should be reached because a conclusion was never given to you with enough information or facts to make that decision. So when we get this story from the YouTube attorney about how, wow, there's just not enough evidence, but we like to make it scary and big in the news because views are great. Well, he's right. Views are great. But to respect the decision of a political party in control of life and death power in the criminal system without seeing any of the facts and any of the evidence, we could not make the choice that you're saying, which is at some point we just don't have anything to point to them being criminals. We can't make that choice. We can never live with ourselves with that.
That's valid. So when the next Democrat Attorney General is asked the same question, and they will be, and they say, yeah, there's nothing to see here, we just don't believe them either. So there is no end.
That's why it feels so bad. That's why people get so upset. It's the government hiding things. Sometimes the government does us wrong, but stuff that really bothers us the most, and you see it the most in marriage cases between men and women where they're lying to each other during their divorce about what they have, what they don't have, whatever. It's that withholding of truth that gets people the most upset because they're violated. It creates PTSD for them. Remember, the only reason we think about Kennedy is because of PTSD. The only reason we think about Epstein is because of PTSD. It creates this.
I agree with you on the societal issue, and my argument's more rhetorical in the sense of it never goes away. This story won't go away because not having all the evidence in front of us assumes us to believe that there's more evidence we don't know about. Therefore, somebody's guilty. And then at some point, if anything ever comes out that says, okay, somebody's guilty, then we're all right.
No. There's no assumption that there's not enough evidence. We know, or that there's evidence, that the evidence doesn't exist. We know that evidence exists that we don't have access to. We know step one, element one, does other evidence exist? Right.
Yeah, we know there's evidence that we don't know about, but we don't know what that evidence is, nor do we know if it's meaningful.
Correct. Which means that you as an adjudicator of the situation cannot adjudicate with any decision. You can't make a final decision and say, well, there's no evidence because they didn't provide me evidence. Therefore, everybody's free to go. Everybody is not a criminal. That's why everybody gets so upset.
And we're back to the Kennedy assassination. It just never goes away.
So here's beyond this talk, beyond this situation, when it comes to those particular Epstein, Kennedy, the reason why these stories continue is because when a wrong occurs, and we have this expectation that our judicial system will fix it by creating a justice situation by punishing somebody for the wrong. When they don't fix it, we lose faith in our judicial system to fix wrongs that might occur to us. And that is why we emotionally feel so bad because we feel that we might be harmed and no justice will come from it. And that is why Kennedy assassination, potentially being assassinated. That is why Epstein potentially being abused. That is why these harms are engraved in the minds of Americans, because they know that when the judicial system does not appropriately find a way to deliver justice, that we take on the risk of being harmed without any form of healing, any form of being made whole actually occurring. And so this is why these things live on forever. So when, YouTube attorney says, hey, we don't have any facts, is what it is, you're on your own, shit is what it is, it's disgusting. It's horribly disgusting, because he is inbreeding, he is pushing into the minds of the American people the idea that they not only don't get to have the facts, they not only don't deserve the facts, but they just have to go with the flow of whatever the government is going to tell them. And look, your proffer is, okay, the other side will come in and then we'll get the other side. The other side, right? The argument that, hey, they'll release the truth. Do you trust the Democrats or Republicans in a highly politicized political situation where some of their sponsors, who are billionaires, who put their butts in the chairs to be the politicians that they are, do you trust either side when it comes to getting hired for the next session in Congress? Do you trust either side to actually even give you any of the evidence that exists with this case? Because if you have a secret file that I don't know about, I'd love to see it.
Right. Well, no, I don't trust either side to tell us the truth, but that it's not relevant to the matter, in that we've created a belief system based on tiny bits of information. I mean, there is the possibility that Epstein was a terrible human being, but was also a very social, wealthy dude. And the two were total coincidences. That possibility exists, but we ignore it selectively because the other possibility is far more exciting to talk about.
I mean, you're resting the laurels on the idea that this is exciting and therefore we go towards exciting. I'm resting my laurels on the human being has fear towards being abused. If you look at rabbits and other animals, they don't reproduce as much when they are fearful of something attacking them, harming them, etc. The same thing with humans. A lot of people aren't having kids right now because they're afraid of wrongs occurring to them and them not being able to go ahead and take care of their own, themselves, etc., their kids, whatever. I believe,
humans have a love-hate relationship with fear. I mean, it's both a motivator and a disruptor.
Well, it's the only reason we survived. It's the only reason we're here. You know what I mean? If we didn't run back into our cave, the dinosaurs. So,
right.
But
yeah, my point is it's possible that Oswald killed Kennedy. It's also possible that Epstein was a horrible human being, but was very popular in social circles and, invited a bunch of people to his pretty island. And nothing untoward happened when anybody important was there other than Epstein and his partner. So that's kind of my point, is that this has become far more than it necessarily is, but we can never answer either question.
But we don't have a right to, because they won't give us the evidence.
At this point, it's just a fun exercise. Because everyone is waiting for that piece of information, and
they're never going to get it.
That piece of information may not exist.
Well, no, we know it exists. We know that travel logs exist. We know that cell phone data exists. We know that communications, meetings, extra videos, photos exist.
We don't know that George Mitchell or Donald Trump or yes, constitutional lawyer Dershowitz.
Yeah, Dershowitz.
We don't have any evidence that they ever did inappropriate things with underage people to avoid certain words.
But why don't you have that? Why don't you have that evidence?
Well, those went, two of those went to court.
No. We're taking the United States court system out of this. Why don't you personally have that evidence? Because you can't make a decision on this based off of the court system, because the court system did not share with you all of the things that were happening in that court's decision. And court's decisions, the judicial group, the judge, only can make a choice based off the facts that are presented. And facts don't always come into the court correctly or at all. So you specifically, why don't you have the ability to adjudicate these decisions?
Well, because we don't have, and probably shouldn't have, access to all of the relevant information for various reasons.
So you accept that you are not worthy of the evidence, and therefore you'll never know what realistically happened, and therefore all of the hoopla in the news is a lot of excitement that maybe shouldn't be there.
Well, yeah, to some extent, yes. You know, am I eligible to see, X people's cell phone records for X number of years and all that? No, I'm me personally, the general public isn't authorized to see that. So we have to depend on someone in power to tell us what it says or not. And the assumption here is that they're not, and that's understandable.
But the assumption is they will do a proper adjudication and come down to a relevant decision that is accurate based on the facts. Although the problem is some of these judges, their kids received very, very large donations to their nonprofits when it comes to these adjudications.
I don't disagree, but if evidence of a conspiracy isn't evidence of a crime, I mean that it comes down to that.
But do you feel that we should ignore the potential of a crime because we were not provided with evidence, but we accept that we're not worthy of receiving it in the first place?
Well, I think at some point we just have to accept the fact that we don't know what we don't know.
And do you feel that as a result of that, there should not be more communication related to the topic of it thereafter in the news?
Well, how many more decades do we need to talk about the JFK assassination?
Well,
or anything other than the fact that it was terrible that a president was killed?
Okay, true. But we talk about it because we don't want the government to forget that we know they're full of shit.
Well, I don't disagree. I fully agree with you there.
Yeah. So kind of like the Jewish religion, we celebrate things or we don't celebrate things. We kind of, have a shitty day because we're trying to remember and we're trying to reteach ourselves the lessons. And certain things in the history of the American people keep coming back up. And the truth is, you're right. At some point, we stopped talking about them. Like, let me ask you this. When was the last time somebody brought up the Battle of Gettysburg with you?
Been a while.
It's been a while, but there was some sloppy stuff going on in the Battle of Gettysburg. Some of it would be very newsworthy even to today. But yet, considering everything that happened, considering that we don't have all the facts, considering that was a long time ago, considering that America is the way it is now, do we talk about it, or have we accepted at this point that lies were told, things went wrong, people were mistreated? Do we just accept and allow that process to move out of the news cycle and we just never return to it? Do we accept that that's the way it is?
Well, at some point, we've entered the phase where all new information may not be relevant or even real. I mean, and that's certainly true of the Kennedy case, and certainly true of many of the discussions around the peccadillos of the founding fathers and other things, is that, yes, we have all this information, much of which we can't even prove necessarily that the facts are true. So that opens a different can of worms. But again, and back to the Jewish thing, is that at some point we accept what we don't know.
All right, let me give you, and this is where I want you to see where I'm getting at. Let's assume that there's a technology out there that didn't exist before when the crime occurred, and now it exists. And now we can know definitively that the person who was the perpetrator did it because of some blood sample, some whatever. Now, let's assume we go into the future again. And 10 years from now, we have the ability to have a viewing television that will allow us to go back in time to those locations and see the actual truth of what happened, the actual factual truth of what happened, not interrupted, not manipulated, the actual truth, a new technology. Once we have that new technology, go ahead.
I understand your point, but if we could do that, we wouldn't have the fun of talking about Kennedy for 60 years or talking about Epstein for 10. We would know the facts, and it'd be no fun to talk about anymore.
Oh, we would talk about it even more.
Because, even if the Warren Commission report came out and said, yeah, it was a giant conspiracy, and these are the people who did it, and the FBI and the CIA and the mob and the Russians and the Cubans all got together and killed Kennedy, we wouldn't be talking about it anymore.
Well, if we knew exactly what happened, the way we would be talking about it, because we still would, it's the death of a president, we just wouldn't be talking...
Other than the death of the president aspect, but it's far more fun to talk about what we don't know.
Yes, I would agree with you there. However, I think that if we had the actual factual truth, a magical TV that could go backwards in time and see the locations where the incident happened as it happened, I think that people would treat it more like the Jewish people do, where we would remember what occurred and go and practice the principles of not allowing that to happen again, and celebrate, holidays through the practice of remembering. I think people would be practicing that a lot more when it comes to these situations. Or I could be wrong, or they could just be like, F it, I don't care, it's fine. Yeah.
Well, truth begets faith. You can strengthen your faith with proof, and you can also destroy your faith with proof. The two are, we're very happy to believe what we believe. Sometimes we're proven right, sometimes we're proven wrong. But we do take enjoyment in belief, whether it be religion or politics or lots of other things.
Now, our famous YouTube attorney proffered that people are blowing things up in the news when the evidence isn't there. I now look to you and say, considering that we look to the great pharaohs of Egypt, and we have all this interest of what could have been, how it was actually practiced, what actually happened. We look to the great wars and moments of jurisprudence in the Roman era, where it was having vast territories, and the Senate would rule on things and make decisions on things, and we wouldn't always know the full truth. Is not knowing the full truth and then having discussions about it a healthy thing or an unhealthy thing And if they are both, do you feel that we should continue to have discussions about it, even if we don't have all the evidence, but one day might?
Well, it's a fun intellectual exercise, but that's all it is. I mean, if Moses walked up and said to Pharaoh, "Let my people go," and Pharaoh said, "Oh, okay," and they left.
Cool beans, hey.
we wouldn't have to eat matzah.
Right. Take a walk.
You know, I mean, so I mean, it's knowing the past for certainty creates its own issues. So, yeah, I mean, it would be wonderful to know the answers to these questions, but at some point, you know, we could argue. And, you know, I mean, the Jack the Ripper story kind of fizzled away because after 37,000 versions of the truth, we finally said, well, maybe we just don't know what the truth is.
But we learned a lot from that, because remember, the greatest thing of the American,
well, we made up a lot about it. Whether we learned anything is questionable.
Oh no, I disagree. The point of AI is hypothetical analysis at its highest level. That's what these situations are. It's hypothetical analysis of what could have, should have, would have been. It's what stretches the human mind to have the best analysis skills it's ever had. I mean, you can feed the brain a lot of protein, but the result is the analysis skill to achieve, you know, these incredible feats. I mean, look, if we don't have great analysis skills where we think of hypotheticals, we wouldn't have all the innovations we have today. You know, we wouldn't have a dishwasher. We wouldn't have this or that or whatever. You know what I mean? We wouldn't. So in order to innovate, we have to have hypothetical analysis. In order for Einstein to come up with relativity, special relativity, you know, he would have to hypothetically create all these scenarios in his brain to walk among, to envision what they could potentially be. Now, granted, not everybody's Einstein, so a lot of stuff they're going to create is like a who, what, when, and where, who held the candlestick and hit the person over the head. Sure, I grant that, absolutely. But it is that analysis capability that makes the human race the superior strength on planet Earth. That's how we came up with the things that we use to destroy each other.
No, I agree.
So do you still agree that your original premise, which was that overhyping something, even though the evidence has been presented, that it is something that's not good or shouldn't continue and is what it is?
Well, my position hasn't changed in that we don't know more today than we knew yesterday. So being more alarmed is probably not a valid response.
So knowing that they will not provide a list of names of people who were already considered, people who weren't considered, because you weren't provided the evidence, that does not in your...
But we don't do that in our system of jurisprudence. We don't throw out a list of suspects for the public to vet to protect the innocent, because a lot of the suspects are in fact innocent.
Innocent, yeah.
So I'm not going to go that far, but at the same time, at some point, we have to believe or simply accept what, you know, Patel, Bongino, Bondi, et cetera, say, or we just accept that they're always going to lie to us and get over it.
Do you personally accept Bondi telling you what she told you?
I don't have any reason to doubt her.
Well, I would tell you this. You're not going to be a great lawyer. Because lawyers, the number one job we have is to question things.
I'm I'm trying to be a critical guy doing a van YouTube show.
But you're doing, look, you're doing well because you're defending your point. But if you were to represent somebody, right, who was harmed in this scenario, and Pam Bondi just came out and said, we don't have a list. There's no list. There's none at all. Oh, look at this. There's nothing.
Right.
How would that make your client feel?
And to Shapiro's point, list is a specific thing and not a concept. But in the world of the media and the populace, it's a concept.
No, a list is a specific thing, and we're not given the evidence that would create the list, the evidence of the individuals who have already been talked about that are on the list. I mean, there is literally already a list because lawsuits occurred and they got out of it. But we're accustomed to that. When rock stars have allegations made against them, when they're sued, they seem to go to the nice prison with the nice room if they're able to be convicted. So we know that there is a list. The only thing in question is how many people are on it and what their names are, and what evidence ties them to doing actions that are immoral. You know, remember.
Well, that goes back though to what is the list?
No, that goes back to what is immoral. Because remember, you go back 1,000 years, you go back 2,000 years. The things that these guys were doing with these women was not only standard application. That's how you made new humans. That was the process.
Right.
You see, our moral standard has changed, and we want to protect.
Judging morality and right and wrong in a purely contemporary context is improper.
No, it's the standard. That's the standard. Morality defines what our legal standards are. Our rules are based off of what we believe is proper.
In a contemporary form, yes.
Yeah, but that's what you're saying there. It's
we can say slavery was wrong, and you can go
today,
back 200 years, and we can still say slavery was wrong, but it wasn't illegal.
Well, no, there were people back in the day that believed slavery wasn't wrong, right? So they believed they can enslave African Americans, they could slave the Irish, they could slave some of the Scottish, they could slave, some of the Native Americans. Back then it wasn't immoral, it wasn't wrong, because they believed it wasn't wrong, and they were the standard.
Well, and wrong and immoral. I'm parsing, but I agree. I mean, and
I love this conversation, by the way, because I'm getting to know you better, which is good. You're a highly analytical person, which is very good. You also stick with your original theory, which is good.
We're an hour and something.
12 minutes.
An hour and 11 minutes in. We've pissed off the chat at this point, but yeah, I certainly have enjoyed it, and I hope you haven't been getting 37,000 other phone calls, because I called in case somebody else did.
It's okay. There's literally one person who called, and then that was. I mean, it's when I'm going to be live in 2 days anyways to answer questions again. But I present this final argument to you. We have the Constitution to be our back lineman, like the fundamental cornerstone, the giant wall that represents what we are as Americans, our foundational beliefs, like our most ethics. Oh, somebody is calling. All right, let me get this call real quick, but excellent, good sir. Okay, this was amazing. Yeah.
All right, please do. Thanks, Walter.
Thank you, good sir. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Hi, this is Attorney Walter Hnot. We are live on YouTube. Remember to use a fake name throughout this process. What is your legal question? Go ahead. And they hung up. They hung up. Oh, they hung up. The irony of jumping off the call to answer it. The irony. I don't think they meant to hang up, though, because it's not the first time they called. Hold on. Let me put it on speaker real quick. Let's see if we can get this person on the phone real quick. Let's see if this person answers. They're ready to rock and roll. Let's see if we can get this person on the phone and ready to go. Hi, this is Attorney Walter Hnot. We are live on YouTube. What is your legal question? But remember to use a fake name. Go ahead.
All right, this is about expedited reinstatement.
Okay.
Can you only file it once in your lifetime, Or can you repeat it? And how is it affected by the new bill passed by Trump? Thank you.
Jeez Louise. How is it affected by the new... Then he hung up. All right, so let's review. Can you file it again? Can it be repeated? Yes, you can file it more than once. There's a lot of little specific details and caveats on it, but yes, you can. How does the bill affect it? That is a really good question. All right, well, let's break it down into the most basic things. There's the 24-month rule and the 5-year rule, but let's actually focus on the bill aspect of this. All right, the purpose of the bill is to cut down on spending of the government, cut down on fraud of the government. Right now, a lot of disabled are having to go find a job because their monthly check isn't enough. So as a result of that, a lot of the disabled have been put in a really tricky situation where they're basically saying they're not disabled because they have to go earn more money to be able to survive, which shows the government that they're earning close to, at, or above substantial gainful activity. This bill, as it is promoted, will make the economy more efficient and ultimately will save more money for retired people through the whole, tax write-off-y kind of thing, where they don't, basically where they're not taxed as much for earned income that they have coming in. So ultimately what will happen with this bill is that from a perspective related to retired people will be able to keep more of their money. And from a Social Security standpoint, which EXRs really aren't used a lot for retirement, it's mostly for disability. So I guess if we're using the EXR for disability, it means that the economy will improve and disabled people will be able to, although I don't know if they will, because it's not like prices are going to go way down. It's not like Walmart's going to roll back prices really quickly and aggressively to the point where all of a sudden things are like cheap again. And these rental rates are never really going to be going down that much. So I don't think it will have a big effect on the disabled. I think the point of an EXR is you try to go out and do something, or you're somehow outside of the program and then they let you jump back into it. I think the EXR has a lot of people trying to work and they may have to jump back into disability benefits and the economy may improve. So the value of the dollar will be better, but I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference because let's just call it like it is. Food is never really coming down again. Rental prices never really coming down again. The big, beautiful bill was for the retired. It wasn't for the disabled. And that's because there's tens of millions of more people that are retired than on disability benefits. Like if we look up, okay, so let's see. How many people are retired today? How many people are on retirement benefits today in America, right? So it's probably, 70.6 million people approximately. So how many people are on SSDI benefits today in America? So 7.3 million. So in other words, just to kind of like validate something, Trump cares about the retired because the retired is a large enough voting bloc to change the election going forward. Okay. The disabled are not. There's not enough of them. And the SSDI people have a lot of Republicans in it. The SSI people who are disabled and impoverished have a lot of Democrats in it. If you're poor, you usually vote Democrat. If you're middle income or more, you tend to lean middle to right, unless you're part of an academia institute. And of course, you lean left then, usually. Yeah, Walmart has special discounts for certain people. Certain things have a little notation on their identification card that show how you can get, this food can be used for like food stamps or whatever. So yeah, they do have those. But I do not see this heavily affecting the disabled. It was not designed for the disabled. It was designed specifically for the retired, because the disabled are not a large enough group of votes. You know, like if you were like going after votes, you'd go after the Christian vote. You'd go after the drinking vote. You'd go after the retired vote. You go after votes that basically have groups that are like 50 million plus people. Because, you know, at the end of the day, you need to grab as many people as you can to get you in. That's the whole game. To obtain and retain power, you have to get votes. Veterans benefits are stacked with SSDI or stacked with retirement. If I think what you're really asking me with this whole EXR situation is what should have come out, what should have been the legislation that should have been in the big beautiful bill pertaining to disabled people. If you want disabled people to succeed in a post-Biden America, right? Because Biden was a shit show when it comes to economic policy. I know COVID, I know grocery store chain owners, I get it. If you wanted them to succeed, you would have to increase the SGA so that the SGA was somewhere around, instead of like 1,600, maybe around 2,500. This would allow a lot more people to earn money while being disabled. The only kicker is that would act as a feeding environment for the sharks. Although I don't want to really call them sharks in a negative way. Like, it's their job to sniff out the blood, investigate, and find out people who are not truly disabled. It would create a scenario where more disabled were working, and then it would force more of them onto the traditional ticket to work program, because they would be afraid to not be on the ticket to work program. Because if you're not on the ticket to work program, then they can investigate you. So it would force disabled people onto the ticket to work program out of fear of being investigated by OIG. So the success rate of the ticket to work program would likely go up, because more people would be able to earn more before losing benefits. That's how I would approach this. I would have modified the SGA to be higher, 2,500, and I would have modified the ticket to work program to be more relaxed to get people to go and work and retain as much of their benefits as possible. That's how I would have gotten the SSDI vote. But again, 8 million people, SSDI vote, it's not enough. You know, if you look at groups, you pretty much go to whatever's going to get you the most people, religions, people who use, you know, this software, people who believe in, you know, this type of lifestyle. You know, like the suburbanites, they're a vote block. The city people, they're a vote block, right? The suburbanites, you know, you're going to see a mixed reaction there. You're going to see like the city people, they're all voting Democrat. You're going to see the country people, they're all voting Republican. That's just kind of how that whole swing goes. Although you'll see some country people being like YouTubers that are super liberal, super left. That's not the usual in country. If you ever go into the country, they are not cool with paying that much of their money, their earnings, to inner city people who have never worked in their entire life. They're not cool with that. Trump could have done a lot more for the disabled population, but the disabled population is a very tricky voting bloc. And that is because a large percentage of them are mentally unsound to the point where they're severe enough to have, you know, could be personality disorder, could be a IQ issue, could be, you know, anxiety, depression, panic attacks, PTSD, whatever. So as a result of that, you have a situation where you can go ahead and do great things for the disabled. You can make their health insurance better. You can increase their monthly check, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, they are also, of the groups that exist, the most likely of the voting block groups, like, you know, 18 plus, you know, whatever. They are the most likely to be mentally manipulated to the point where if you give them something, it'll never be enough, and then that could turn them against you. So I know some politicians don't try to make the connection to the disabled because they're worried about the backlash that'll come from it. I think realistically, at the end of the day, so here's the problem with America for disabled. The whole program is based off of the ideology of you're not able to work, right? And that's why you get benefits. Or you are so severe in your impairment that you meet a listing level criteria, or your compassion allowance listing, which is like you're extremely severe. You're like super bedbound. The thing is, our society has manipulated with our politicians the amount of money needed to survive. So disabled don't really get to live a peaceful life. They live a sit there and do nothing because you can't afford to do anything life. That is an interesting position because the Republicans sell people a future if they work hard, which doesn't apply to disabled people because they can't work hard. Democrats sell, they'll take care of you, they'll pay for things, everything will be wonderful, and then they don't deliver with their bills. So it's like, hi, this is Attorney Walter Hnot. We are live on YouTube. Remember to use a fake name. Oh, geez. That's weird. Let me see real quick. Let me see if that person calls back, we'll pick up the phone. I'm not sure if it's the same person. Let me see. I think I missed a call. Oh, wait. Yeah, here. I'll call them back. Hold on. Here we go. Let's see if I can get this person on the phone.
Hello?
Hi, this is Attorney Walter Hnot. We are live on YouTube. Remember to use a fake name throughout this process. What is your legal question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just won my disability case back in March, and I finally received my first check. As far as monthly,
Yeah.
that was I believe in May 1st. I'm still waiting on the lump sum, and I've called, and I guess it's supposedly at the last place it goes to, and that's been there for like 2 months. So, what have you typically seen as far as, how many months does it take to get that final?
So usually you get your back pay in 3
Lump sum.
weeks, and then 4 weeks you get your forward pay, which is like your check every month. So you're obviously way past that, which means it's stuck at a payment division. And this is purely SSDI, right? There's no SSI, SSDI computation.
No, it's just disability. Yeah, it's
Okay.
no SSI.
No hybrid, yeah. So, okay. So in that instance, you basically have to find out who the payment division person is, get the phone number of the division, get the phone number of the extension of the person, and you have to call them and check in with them each week. And the thing is, it could be Jamaica, New York that the payment division is in. It could be in New Mexico, California, whatever. But the point is, there's a specific person that is assigned your specific back pay for payment release. Now,
Okay.
with that said, sometimes payments are not released because the government is doing a little bit more studying of things. Like, for example, they're studying things you might have done in the past, things the adjudicator did, etc. So let's say the adjudicator approves a claim, right? And then all of a sudden appeals counsel comes down and says, whoa, buddy, we're going to go ahead and look at this because we don't think that was the right decision. Although it sounds like you're past that point, you still might get hit with that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It just seems like it's been so long. It's just taking forever. And I'll call every once in a while, and it's supposedly like in Maryland, Baltimore, or wherever it is that they make the final decision. They send me a letter, and I'm supposed to have it within 5 days or so forth. But I haven't received anything.
Did they provide you
really no explanation?
Yeah. Did they provide you the user, the name of the person and the extension number of the person that's overseeing the payment division?
No.
Okay. So did you ask for that?
Payment division. No. I will though.
Yeah. So if they won't give it to you,
number.
yeah, you can. Well, yeah, call the 800 number. If they won't give it to you, have your attorney call them, and they usually give it out to the attorney.
So payment division, and they'll put me with the person that
You'll get the
That's
username.
good.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But rember they just fired/retired 7,000 people, so not
Right.
everything is smooth as butter inside the SSA.
Okay. Okay. Now, is there anything? I know there's sometimes you can help, you can call and get them to help, expedite things. But I think that's for people with like severe conditions and so forth. I don't know if it's been a long time, will they look into that or?
I mean, if you make it to month 3 without payment of back pay, then you'd reach out to the regional field office and request them to go ahead and follow up with the payment division, and then have the payment division send a letter from the local field office out to you as to status update on what's going on.
Okay. Okay. All right. I'll do that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely good, sir. You have a wonderful, wonderful night.
You too. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So we had an amazing video tonight. Super spicy, amazing debate. I really super enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Some of you I know you didn't, but look, it is what it is. You know what I mean? It's a free call in, yada yada yada. This was an excellent chance for me to ask Kosher about his thoughts on things, see how he would defend them and go about it. It was very, very good. He did a good job defending his assessment and original assertion, which was good. I think in total, this was kind of the argument with it, was that the hypothetical assessments, this hypothetical, this hypothetical, this hypothetical, if we look at it in this universe's view, and this universe's view, and this universe's view, I think that the idea of debate is very sexy. It's very sexy when it comes to news channels opening up ideas and trying to sell you exciting, scary, wonderful news. Yes. Because let's call it like it is. You need views to get basically that commercial break to be filled with some sponsor. I would say this. I feel like a lot of universities have become very one-sided. I feel like the government becomes one-sided every 4 years, depending on which side it ends up on. I feel like at the end of the day, YouTube has been an amazing thing. Think about how many YouTubers are out there providing alternative thoughts and patterns, alternative hypotheticals, alternative options to a particular topic. I mean, sure, there's tons of videos out there on how to use this tool, how to build a house. Those are great too. But I think the debate function, people going against Jordan Peterson, people going with Jordan Peterson, that tension. I'm going to tell you about a superhero. He kind of wore a cape, kinda. It was more of a robe. There was a superhero that we had in America. His name was Supreme Court Justice Scalia. Scalia was, in my opinion, one of the most brilliant Supreme Court justices that we've ever had. Although, you go historically back in time, there's quite a few. Cardozo's way up there. The thing is, he would always talk about this interlocking gridlock. We would have laws and the process, and nobody could get anywhere. And you had to love the gridlock. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to stay in the industry. And what he really meant by the gridlock was essentially debate to change our programs to become more efficient towards the benefit of humans. That's what he really meant. He meant you got to love this because you want to innovate solutions to it. I think debates are key to the future of the human race. And that is because if we look at how humans got better at doing things, not just putting rockets up into, the great sky above the earth, but if we look at how humans are living now, modern day medicine, if we, and that's another topic. How is Big Pharma not releasing medicine that we could be using? I think if we're really honest with each other, I just saw it was very live, Diana. It was very live. It was very spicy. It was very saucy, but it was good. It was a good debate. Some people liked it, some people didn't, but it was a good debate. And I was pushing Kosher as much as I could within a variable, reasonable amount because I wanted to see what would come out of him. I wanted to see where the juices were on his logical assertion of what would be proper. I think that in debates, we realize that there's two sides to it, but we also realize that we like a side. And the reason we like Aside is because sometimes it feels good to just see a solution and that's it and we're done. And some people like Aside where it opens up more questions and becomes even spicier. I mean, they literally have entire TV shows devoted to exactly that. Ancient Aliens, a very successful, lots of season show, is exactly that, right? Did ancient aliens do blah, 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 right? Were they present for blah, 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 blah? It's all a bunch of hypotheticals that maybe could, should, would have occurred. Ultimately, at the end of the day, this channel is really that. It provides you up-to-date news, and then you get kind of my assessment as to how much BS you're being fed from different groups, whether it's the government or a political party or somebody in power in some way because they have money. Okay. What I love about it is that people are losing faith in just believing somebody is right because they are presented to them as being right. You know, we always assumed Elon was doing great with this until people started to hate him for this, and then people started to hate him for that, and then people started to hate him for this, right? We always assumed he was, oh, look at him with these cars, it's amazing, he's an innovator, he's in California, look at him, oh my goodness, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden people started hating him. We are no longer assuming that we will love somebody in the public light for their entire life because it's Batman theory, right? They love you until they can hate you, and then they will hate you until they love you. And then they'll love you until they hate you. And I think that, you know, the super rich and the wealthy, they're on this rotation of trying to keep people to love them because they always have something to lose. The oligarchs of Russia lost a lot of boats and a lot of money, but a lot of yachts were lost. The royal families around the country, they're losing their ability to go ahead and govern all these little island nations that they took over. I think ultimately America goes through the same thing. They had a phrase in World War II, and it was basically only if, I'm not going to say his name because they'll flag the video, but only if he knew. Only if he knew. World War II, Germany, the leader. Only if he knew. That's what they would say. When the police back then were coming around in Germany and mistreating German citizens, the German citizens would say, only if he knew, because, you know, he was so vast, he was so above everything. He couldn't focus on all the little details here, 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 and here. And it is that idea of a being so high up in the clouds, being so loved, so cherished, so wonderful, so amazing, so whatever, that we give a halo effect to believe that they are our little angel because they wouldn't do that bad thing that we see as bad in our mind. That is disappearing. We don't trust politicians, super billionaires, or people with a good idea anymore for the rest of their life. That is, to me, awesome. Awesome. Because if somebody wants to be great and a billionaire and achieve this and achieve that and unlock this and unlock the mysteries of Earth, unlock the mysteries of the universe, then they're going to have to keep fighting to use their genius to innovate the future to keep earning your trust. That's a good thing. That's a very, very good thing. All right. Anyways, Jim Lippy just said it's a pre-recorded live. I've just disproved him. It's obviously not a pre-recorded live. But I appreciate the assertion of the falsehood. But anyways, I will catch you all later. Thank you so much for being a part of this amazing live. It's much cooler than usual. Yes, tomorrow morning I go work with the homeless. So just keep in mind for most of the day, it is, you know, it's one of those gigs where I'm not going to be available for the regular calls because I go work with the homeless at the homeless facility. I will catch you all a little bit later. Please remember to like. Please remember to subscribe. Head over to Google. Type in Disability Resolution Law Firm, Disability Resolution Florida. Throw some stars up there if you want. And then on Thursday, I'll go live again to answer questions. We'll do a more regular one, although I much more enjoy this than what we normally do. Please be nice to Kosher, by the way. Some of you guys are mean to him. You don't need to be mean to him. You know what I mean? He's got a lot of great ideas. He's doing a great job doing the moderation. Please be nice to him. I will catch you all a little bit later. And please, please, please sleep well. Represent your impairment properly to others. Be the moral justice of your impairment to let other people know what it is, how it works, things like that. I will catch you all later and have a wonderful, wonderful night. Thank you so much, Attorney Walter Hnot. And we'll go from there. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.